The best film emulation tool I've ever used just came to Final Cut Pro, and I want to tell you all about it today. Okay, so this plugin is called Dehancer Pro. I've made a few videos on it before, but this is the first time it's been available in Final Cut Pro. It's just been for DaVinci Resolve before, so this is super exciting. But first things first, I just want to mention that this is a beta. It's not fully complete, so there might be a few minor bugs, but with that said, let's jump into the software. Okay, so I'm inside of Final Cut Pro here, and you can see I have a few clips loaded up, and I'm just going to show you how to apply the effect and what it really does. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop an adjustment layer on top of my clips here, just so I can apply the same adjustments to all of them. And so now that I have an adjustment layer here, I'm going to go into my effects, and when you install Dehancer Pro, which is going to come up under film emulation, and it's just this effect right here. So I'm just going to drag it right on top of my adjustment layer. Okay, so when it's first applied, it's going to make an interesting look to your shots. Maybe not the best, but we need to tweak the settings, of course. So inside of the settings here, I'm going to run through it really quickly. So under input, you're able to choose a source of your camera. You can choose Rec 709 if it's just regular Rec 709 footage, but if you want to get more specific, you can actually go in and choose a camera. You can choose a vendor. For me, this is a Sony a7S III, so that's what I'm going to select. And then for camera format, I shot this in S-Log3, S-Gamut 3 Cine. So I just select that, and then automatically it converts it to a sort of Rec 709. It does apply a film look to start, so if we just turn that off really quick, you can see this is basically what the Rec 709 conversion of my S-Log footage looks like, with a little film grain, of course. But we're able to make it look much more filmic than this, so let me show you how. So like I said, there's all these film profiles which you can put over your footage, which are more or less a LUT on top of your footage. So if I enable this, right now you can see it's Kodak Vision 3 250D. There's all sorts of colors like Africa Photo, Fuji Color, Ilford, Kodak, all those sorts of standard looks and film stocks that you might expect. So as you can see, if we just filter through a few of these, you can get very different looks between all the film stocks. So for this example, I think I'm just going to use Fuji Color C200 just because it's a nice kind of neutral, slightly pink look, but it just looks nice and filmic. So as you can see, now that we've applied this, we have our film look to our footage. And if we do our push and pull here, you can either make it a little bit more intense or less intense depending on the look you want. I'm just going to leave that nice and centered. And then as you can see, we have different settings below here. So we have our expand, which you can basically change the black point and white point, print, and color head. I don't really ever use, but you can get into those if you want. But now we get into film grain, which is one of the more important features of Dehancer. So if I zoom in really quickly, we can start to see what the film grain actually does to our shots, and it looks really, really natural. That's one of my favorite things about Dehancer Pro as opposed to other film emulations. It just has really good looking grain. So if we look under the settings here, we can basically change the size of the grain, making it a lot bigger or smaller, change the amount. Of course, you can get crazy with it if you want. I like to keep it relatively low. You can change the film resolution, which is really cool. It takes a lot longer to render, but if you bump it all the way up, you get really high definition grain that just looks insanely realistic. And then of course you can bring it down if you don't quite need that quality. And then you can change the amount of grain in your shadows, midtones, and highlights. So really tweaking that just to get the look that you want. And next in our settings, we have Halation, which basically adds red highlights around contrasty areas. So if I apply it, as you can see, these contrasty areas with the white and dark have this red highlight around them that's really apparent, a lot more apparent than you'd have in most situations. But if you want to see specifically where it's applying it to, you can turn on the mask mode, and it just highlights where the halation applies, which is really cool to see. And it helps you to dial in how much you actually want. So if you go into the diffusions, you can increase your local diffusion, and if you turn off the mask mode, now you can see it's pretty halation-y. It's bloomed out a lot and not how I love it. I like to keep it pretty minimal, but you're really able to dial it in and change all the smoothness and diffusions and amplifications and hues of the actual halation. So it gives you a lot of options, and it is something that you do see in film. But like I said, I usually try and keep it pretty minimal in my shots just so it doesn't look too fake and added. And then next in our settings, we have bloom, which if I apply it, basically blooms out the highlighted areas. And if I apply the mask mode to this, you can see how it just blooms out and adds basically white highlights around the areas that are bright. So if I turn off the mask mode, you can see how that softens the image in a way. It's similar to a Cine Bloom and a Pro Mist filter where it takes the highlights and softens them out. So it's really good with skin in shots and other things, and it just helps to soften your shot. I personally think a Pro Mist on your camera will end up looking better than this, but it is a nice tool to have if you don't have that filter or if you get to use it. It just softens out the image a little bit. And then below here, there's just a few other features that help to add film emulation, such as a vignette. You know, that's pretty standard. It just adds darkness or brightness to your corners. Film breath, which basically adds some vibrations to your shot, and gate weave, which does a similar thing, basically to make it look like film is actually going through a camera and recording and giving you a little bit of those jitters. And then something else really cool is that you can actually add false color. So you can see if your exposure is good, you can check it on this IRE chart. So that's just built in, which is a pretty nice feature. So those are basically the main features of Dehancer Pro in Final Cut Pro. It works essentially the same as in DaVinci Resolve, but it's just built for Final Cut Pro now. So that's super cool if you edit in this software. And playing back footage, it's pretty jerky because it has so many overlays, but it is a bit smoother than DaVinci Resolve, at least in my experience. So I think that's pretty nice. It's good to have it as an option now for Final Cut Pro users. And here are a few shots that I color graded with it. Anyway, that's it for today. If you found this video interesting or helpful at all, be sure to like and subscribe down below. It really helps me out a lot. But with that said, I will see you all next time.